Welcome back to another episode of Analytics Unscripted. I am Dan. I am joined, as always, by the wonderful, the amazing, the fantastic Bhav. How are you doing, Bhav? You well?
Very well, thank you, Dan. What an introduction. I've never had an introduction like that before. I
Never.
feel like
I cannot believe it.
I feel like I owe you the same one. The wonderful and amazing and spectacular Dan. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. I didn't do it just to get it back, but I appreciate it nonetheless. We've just finished recording the episode with Rupali. We spent almost all of it ended up talking about MMM. And again, the whole point of this unscripted lark is that we don't know what we're going to talk about going in. But I think it was a really interesting and quite deep discussion around this whole old/new concept of MMM. But this is someone who you know, right? Rupali, you brought her in. It's your guest you invited in. Tell us, how do you know Rupali?
Well, fun fact, I rang Rupali 10 minutes before we jumped onto this call to record this episode. Yes. So Dan and I, this is so unscripted, we hadn't even planned a guest.
Unscripted and unscheduled.
And unscheduled. So I rang Rupali 10 minutes on WhatsApp and I said to her, hey, Rupali, we're about to record an episode in 10 minutes. Do you want to join us? And she said yes. So I know Rupali just from the industry. I think she reached out to me a while ago and her and I had stayed in touch. And I think, yes, this episode was completely unscripted, but I think given how much of a specialist and expert Rupali is in MMM, it would have been a wasted episode of us if we hadn't gone into MMM to hear her thoughts and learn from her experience. Because as far as MMM goes, I consider her to be an expert. And actually, she's taught me a lot about it. She recently sent me a one-pager about everything she learned when they in-house their MMM model where she is, because we're trying to understand MMM a little bit more internally ourselves. And actually, it was a really useful document to understand, what they learned, the pitfalls they had, things they would do again. So actually, her expertise is fantastic. And I think this conversation was always going to go down MM.
Well, let's not delay everyone from hearing the lovely conversation we just had with Rupali. So with that, on with the show.
Hi, Rupali. Welcome to Analytics Unscripted. We've spoken to you before many times in a personal setting, but also you're a Crap Talks speaker as well. But for our audience who have potentially not seen you before or seen you on LinkedIn, or I've never had a chance to meet you, or they didn't see you talk at Crap Talks, do you want to give us a quick sort of 30-second elevator pitch of who you are, why you are, when you are, what you are?
Those are existential questions, but okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Rupali. I have been in marketing analytics for about 12 years now. And currently, I lead marketing analytics for the international regions at Twilio. What that means is we work with marketing teams, trying to give them visibility of how their investment is performing. And I also lead the global media mix modeling program here at Twilio. So I'm more than happy to talk about that. And I've done MMM in all my past roles, really.
For those of our speakers who don't know what is, Rupali, what is the layman's version of it?
All right. So it's a regression model that tries to isolate the impact of marketing from everything else that is influencing the business. It tries to quantify what your marketing is doing. And if, for instance, your sales may be impacted by the discounts you're running, the promotional activities you're running, anything that you're doing on your website, what MMM tries to do is take all the factors, market factors as well, into account, and then give you a number for what marketing has driven by channel, and hence what your ROI is.
For a podcast that is completely unscripted, and you weren't expecting that question, that is one of the cleanest responses I've ever had. So
well rehearsed.
I like it. Yeah, it was very well rehearsed, and you weren't even expecting that question. So it's nice to speak to experts.
I have spent 10 years talking about MMM to many people.
So for those of, I can already see how this conversation is going, by the way. I know it's unscripted. How does MMM differ to, say, something like attribution or classic attribution modeling?
Okay, it's first of all, MMM is a model. So you know how they say it, no model is correct, but some models are useful. So I like to say it is an estimation for sure. Is it correct? Like all models, MMM is very useful if you always treat it relatively. So if you've built it for a couple of years, you can see how your marketing performance goes up and down. And that's where MMM becomes quite useful. MTA, the way I see it, is more objective. But just because it's objective, it doesn't make that correct either. By which I mean, you know who clicked on your ad, and then you had a sale. So sure, you would like to say that that Google search is what drove that person. And Bhav, I'm going to use the Huel example because I know you work for Huel. That's what led that Google search is what led them to buy your protein powder. But really, they must have heard of Huel either from Instagram or from their friend, or just saw it in the supermarket as well. MMM tries to capture all of that journey and try to estimate how did all of those touch points play into getting to that sale. Whereas something like MTA may take online touch points into account, but might miss a lot of these offline touch points of word of mouth, or your brand created, how your outdoor ads have played into this. And that's where I think fundamentally those two differ.
And MTA, for anyone that's listening, means multi-touch attribution.
So I want to ask a pretty blunt question, because I talk about this kind of thing a lot, and you said a couple of things that triggered me a little bit, which is that this can be quite useful and it's an estimation, right? Which are both examples of I've worked with MMM even when we used to call it econometric and all sorts of different things. But I think the hardest thing I've found or struggled to see is it be used effectively rather than it being an academic project from a bunch of clever people or technologies or vendors that kind of give an answer to something. Because as you said, it's a model. We have other models. There's 100 different MTA models that we use in Facebook ads and Google Analytics and whatever it is you're using. And then we've got MMM over here. You've got post-purchase surveys or point-of-sale data. These are all models, but like no one is more right than another one. And so how have you seen MMM being integrated into this kind of like marketing reporting stack to a point where it is the ROI on the MMM becomes impressive?
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on that. But first thing I would say is in some of the companies that I've worked for, MMM has been so well established that it is the commercial model that people come to first. And MTA is almost the second one that only the channel performance teams ask about, right? I've been in both kinds of teams. I have been in teams where, and I'll give you an example of Sky at Sky Media. MMM was the main source of truth for marketing performance as a whole, and then the digital team, because digital was a small part of the budget and Sky's investment used to be quite significant on TV, on offline channels such as out of home, print, radio, etc. MMM used to be the source of truth. Whereas for a company like King, a gaming company like King, MMM still struggles to be center stage. And that's because it doesn't cost much to download a game off the App Store. And you can really tell people's digital journey of how they have come to download a game. And the offline channels that King uses have significantly less investment than the online channels, right? So I think part of it is the investment strategy of the company as well. What we have done at Twilio, and Twilio, I would say, so King as well, we built MMM from scratch. But at Twilio, MMM was completely new because it had never been built before I came to the company. And Twilio is also very online, but by nature, B2B company requires a very strong brand to be top of mind for a lot of people because the sales cycles are very long. There are many players. It's no one single digital point that is leading people to the point of sale. And that's one of the reasons MMM's value has been seen in the business. I think what happens is sometimes it becomes a very academic project because data scientists usually build an MMM model. And they either have not worked very closely with the marketing team. They do not understand how marketing is bought. What kind of insights does the team need? At what cadence do they need it? Has this groundwork happened? And that really helps with the adoption of these insights. I wouldn't say we are 100% there with that at Twilio, but we are very actively working with the marketing team to understand what type of insights can we provide you? How can we be a part of quarterly business reviews and things like that to help you make better decisions during your planning cycles. And that has, I think, helped with adoption and is slowly helping with adoption. And also, by the way, MMM is a very long project. I don't think that in 2 years you realize the full value. Models need at least a year, I think, to become robust. And then from there on, you start realizing the value. And as you realize the value, more parts of the business get involved. You have more variables going into your model. And that's when it becomes a true commercial model rather than just a media investment model. And that's where the model can be quite powerful when it speaks to people outside of marketing as well.
I think the challenge with this, though, is because I think conceptually I believe in the idea. I think the hard part with something like an MMM is it's always the execution of it. And I think when you tell someone that it's a 12-month journey just to stabilize the model and then 2 years to see the value of that model, it's a hard buy, right? And actually, I go back to the point when when you were talking about Sky has always been very MMM first, and whereas someone like King, it's always been attribution first. And I wonder how much of that is chicken and egg, because Sky was MMM first, probably because they started off doing above the fold activity long before digital world even existed, right? Because you could buy Sky before the internet existed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas actually King is a purely quote unquote digital company. So it rose in awareness and reach through the growth of the App Store and iPhones and Android phones.
Correct.
So they had to lead with acquisition. And then now we're reaching a point where, because I think this is true for any brand, that you start off with one or the other. You pick a camp and you lean into it. And when that's the only thing you know, switching to the other thing is always a hard part.
Can be quite challenging. But it's also the nature of the business. If you think about it, it's like buying a car. I wouldn't buy a car just because you show me 50 Facebook ads. But it's a bigger investment. I need to believe in the brand that I'm buying. Whereas anybody can download a game if I don't like it, or I can buy one pack of fuel. If I don't like it, I'm not going to buy it again.
For anyone listening, you will like it. It's great.
It is delicious.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
We're all hooligans on this episode here.
We are.
Yeah, for sure. Can I pick up something you mentioned, Bhav? Because it's the thing I think that the underpinning of this whole concept of marketing measurement. It's about this idea of moving to something, right? And I don't think that that's the case. It's not. You don't move away from multi-touch attribution to media mix modeling, marketing mix modeling, whatever your acronym of choice is. The point is these are all doing different things. They have their own sets of pros and cons and blind spots and biases. Essentially, all models are biased, and I think this is the thing. And there's going to be so put it this way: like if I work with someone who runs Facebook marketing within a brand, within a digital team, within a company that has online and offline marketing, right? They can see it in a way of like, okay, well, it's even to the point of using some cross-channel multi-touch attribution model like Google Analytics is too much for them because it's not useful for them on a day-to-day basis. They can't change and optimize their bids in Facebook to it. They have to use the multi-touch attribution model based into Facebook, but it's actually a really good attribution model based into that because you get things like the impression, the engagement, the audience data in there, which you just cannot get outside of that walled garden. And so when you take that into another platform like Google or Adobe or even an MMM, you don't get that level of detail. And I think this is where I see this fall down. And I see this fall down whether we're talking about MMM or whether we're talking about Google Analytics or anything else, which is essentially how do we speak to someone who runs, let's say, Facebook marketing and say, hey, look, there's this thing over here that can be valuable to you, but it always, well, I say always, it most of the times ends up as a dashboard or an academic exercise. And tying a marketer who's spending money on ads and creative and audience strategy and whatever, tying that back to multi-touch attribution, tying that back to MMM and understanding that connection. That's still the bit that I don't think we as an industry have figured out. But I want to know from you, like, have you seen any slither of hope connecting these pieces together?
I think that is the interesting bit. You don't build an MMM for a Facebook marketer or someone who is advertising on Google, or like, you don't build MMM for the pieces. You are building an MMM for that top-down budget optimization. You are simply building an MMM to say, put X% here, Y% here, Z% here, and then you are supposed to do channel level optimization separately from Facebook Analytics, Google Analytics, or multi-touch attribution as well, for that matter. Both have to go hand in hand, rather than try to do everything from one thing. MMM cannot give you detailed insights. It can only give you that big picture. And that's what it's best for. Yes.
And I agree with this. I think the problem here, Dan, is as you said, we're not trying to get, do one thing or another thing. It's trying to get people who have built their career in a specific vertical to see the bigger picture. And I think this it becomes kind of like, if you've been indoctrinated to believe that actually performance marketing is the only thing that matters, then you're never going to buy into out of home or TV. But if you're a brand marketer and you believe in the value of a brand and the brand voice, you're never going to think in, oh, I need to do spend and budget and CPA optimization. You're going to think, actually, I want to build a brand around creatives and messaging. And I think the problem is that after a certain point, because I agree with Rupali, you're optimizing your campaigns based on MTA, but your budget optimization should come from something that looks at the bigger picture. And the people who are responsible for that bigger picture need to be agnostic of one thing or another. I think you have to have an open mind to move towards an MMM, because if you're a performance marketer turned CMO, you're never going to buy into TV or out of home, because how would you? You've never experienced it succeed. Or if you have seen it internally, your experience might be that of an unsuccessful launch or way to measure it. So I think so much of it is like dogmatic belief.
Exactly, and I think this is the key thing about understanding the right model for the right audience for the right application. And I think exactly this is where I've seen it before is like budgeting, but then almost it doesn't matter what the marketer is doing essentially, right? So the output of the MMM and the refinement is a way of kind of being more effective in terms of that top level budget. But this precedes the idea or the acceptance that budgets can be moved and adjusted. So I've seen it time and time again where the model says, okay, take 50% of your search budget and put it into social. But then you turn around and be like, maybe we've got 4 search marketers whose jobs are dependent on that. Or maybe we've tied into an annual contract with our agency and we can't reduce our budget. And so we get into things like that. And so that's where I see, I'm not trying to kind of dismiss the notion of it, but I'm just trying to factor in these kind of systems that MMM is a sexy thing. Google just announced they're rolling in their Meridian model into GA360. It's going to be more prevalent. It's another model within the tool belt of our kind of analysis workshop or whatever the analogy I was going for. But we think of this as a budgeting tool, which is great, but it does presume that you have budgets that can be moved and can be moved on a regular basis. That's why I think maybe running this once a year, maybe, but the timing has to be right. And I think that's the hard part, right? This isn't a model that will tell you what to do with your ads. This is a model that help you budget, but then also you need to be able to move those budgets. Otherwise, it's essentially a futile activity.
But I think herein is where lies the problem. And Rupali, I'm keen to hear your thought on this. I know you look like you're about to say something, but I think the problem is when it's looked at in a way too black and white view, in my opinion. When you tell someone, oh, we're going to move the budget from here to here, I think people take it as a personal attack or I failed at my job. It's like you haven't. It's just that this channel is performing better, not because you've done something to make your channel perform worse. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is people often forget that say, for example, the performance channels, the performance marketing channels, they are also an input into the MMM. So if those channels truly are driving demand, the MMM will capture it. I think there's this belief, it's like, well, the MMM is only going to take everything over towards TV or radio or social, which is not true, because there's demand capture channels and there's demand generation channels. And if you are a demand generation channel, the MMM will pick that up. Sorry, Rupali, I had to get that out because I think so many people take MMM as oh my God, it's going to make me look like I'm not doing a good job. I mean, if you're not, it will, but...
Yeah.
No, but if anything, I feel digital channels have more of a shot at getting captured in MMM, because oftentimes when we get TV budgets and we get out-of-home budgets, it's not very accurate. So it actually, if you're a digital marketer, you have more of a chance in showing up in the MMM with the way that the sales are moving than the out-of-home channel. So that's just to put it out there, that's probably going to be the case. Although seasonality and things like that, when you buy media, can work against you. But we'll see. Anyway, the thing that came to mind is right now, we live in a world where budgets are shrinking. Marketing budget, as soon as people face competition, the first thing that shrinks is marketing. So now is the right time to have that conversation. Optimize now rather than leave it for another year, because I've seen marketing budgets shrink every quarter in the past couple of years. And I think most companies are feeling the same squeeze.
Which is interesting then to justify budget for a model that might take a year or two to be fruitful, right?
That's why don't pay an agency 200K a year, and I might be alienating all my agency friends by saying this, but I think you can build so much internally already that you don't need to spend a huge amount of dollars on it. And it's a very fruitful exercise to do anyway.
And you can just spend 150K with me and I'll get you the same thing. It'd be great.
I think it's going to take, it took us 21 minutes to say AI, but I think with AI where it is, I think it's definitely easier to build it. I agree with you. I believe so much of this stuff can and should be brought in-house. I'm going to take my pro MMM hat off, and now I'm going to put on my anti-MMM hat, Rupali, just to push you back into a corner a little bit. So you mentioned the digital channels are so much easier to measure and quantify because that cause and effect relationship is so immediate. Whereas with TV, it's all about timings and where it's planned and the reach and blah, 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 all of those things. If those TV views, I forget what they call eyeballs, whatever the official metric is, for TV planning and media planning is so unreliable, why bother with an MMM in the first place?
I think you bother with an MMM because you want to know if all of your TV budget is having an impact or not. If you are spending a significant amount of money on TV, then you do want to know, and that's why you're bothering with an MMM. Second, there are many ways that econometricians use to measure TV better. And that would be, you have different curves, you can put ad stocks, you can put different saturation points to understand what sort of impact it has and try to fit it better in your model. It really depends on the nature of your business. If I talk about someone like Twilio, where our sales cycles can be so long, it is equally difficult to measure the impact of digital marketing as well as TV on our sales qualified leads. And that's just because of the time that it takes for it to bake into going to a salesperson and then becoming a qualified lead. So for some businesses, that argument does not sit, that is not a reason to measure, because both kind of channels will actually take quite a bit of time to come into. And in fact, even your digital marketing, you will spend a lot of money today. If you are a product, unlike just being an app that is free to download, if you're a product that takes any amount of consideration, you're going to have the same challenge, even from digital marketing, that you're not going to be seeing an immediate impact. And finally, the reason you would still bother with an MMM is because you don't want to keep putting all your money behind your conversion channels. You don't want to keep putting behind, and by conversion channel, I mean PPC. Because at the end of the day, everything leads for people to search. Because what would happen is you'll stop putting money behind TV or all of these other channels, and then you are going to not lead as many people into your funnel, and they won't convert. So there are many reasons as to why you still want to measure, and many reasons, many ways in which you can still measure and make TV and radio and those things work for you in the model.
Can I ask then? Sorry, I know that we're talking a lot about MMM. I didn't even ask whether or not you wanted to talk about MMM, to be fair, but we're going in. We're in this far. Yeah. Fuck it, we'll go the full distance. So there's two things that I find interesting about this whole approach. So first of all, you mentioned around the kind of like lower funnel conversion activity, like branded search, things like that. I completely understand that, but doesn't the whole nature of this regression model or the kind of underlying model pinned on this only identify an attribute for direct response marketing in any meaningful way? So let's take something like brand marketing. Let's say I'm running a TV campaign that is purely brand marketing. I'm a well-known national brand, and I just want to kind of do a brand campaign, remind people we exist. There's no call to action. I'm not driving traffic. I'm not driving conversion. It will have an impact, but that doesn't necessarily dictate an influence on the statistics that we might be seeing, but it's also that kind of bubbling underpinning of brand awareness and kind of being there if someone if we need it in the future. Now, any kind of type of model can't account for that, and I find it hard to then say, if we look at last click multi-touch attribution, it's all around the lower funnel activity. Cool. Let's take a different model or even MMM, but it's still only rewarding direct response marketing in many different ways.
I agree with you. So yes, first of all, if there's no call to action, don't expect an immediate response in the business metrics either. And that's why I never say that MMM is supposed to measure long-term marketing impact, because it's not. It is meant to, it always rewards short to medium-term marketing impact. Is it better than MTA in that regard? Yes, because you can at least, other channels have a shot of coming into the model. But does it actually, like your long-term marketing, you did a big brand campaign? Not really. It's not going to come into the model. Even if you have a very long ad stock, which then I think it's quite meaningless if you enter, if you have furthermore, for econometricians, like a 90% ad stock into the model. I think that renders the model a little bit useless. So it's not for that. And I agree.
Okay. And
We're
so
not
that's
measuring
one
that.
thing.
And there are other ways of measuring that. Like
For sure. And I think we could run
yeah,
uplift tests
exactly.
and all sorts of other stuff to bake
Yeah.
into the
Even
priors or
social
whatever
listening
model.
tools. And I'm a huge advocate for getting that kind of data as well in your suite of measurement, which is social listening, PR, all of those things. And
Nice.
really trying to understand the sentiment around that as well. But MMM is not the way to do it.
So, I mean,
sorry, can I just throw my second part in as well, because I'm working with similar brands that are similar-ish to Twilio in terms of business model, where it's a kind of B2B level activity. And something I've always struggled with, I'd love to get your input as another marketing analytics person, not necessarily MMM related, but B2B has this unique problem whereby advertising is advertising to people and you're selling to businesses. And so it doesn't matter how clever your multi-touch attribution or MMM is, you're still looking at users and clicks and things like that. And it's really hard to associate, okay, well, if I got the CMO over here on Facebook and I've got the analyst over here on TikTok and I've got someone else over here, tying that all into the same acquisition, because an acquisition for you guys is a business. And so understanding that you're going to have slightly separated or individual users all part of the same journey. I'd love to understand, if you're happy to share, like, how do you approach that type of attribution, whereas B2C is a bit more straightforward. You target people, you convert people.
So in the B2B world, everything is leads related, right? So what kind of leads you're getting into your funnel. And I don't know what stage your organization, the one that you're working with, is at, but you have form fills, so getting them into your sales funnel, whereby they are spoken to by a SDR or a BDR, and then they would say, okay, this person has a genuine use case, they might buy from us, and give it to sales, at which point it becomes a sales qualified lead. So my entire prep talk last year was about what exact KPI we should pick around that. But to your question, we at Twilio have started looking at something called, instead of looking at marketing qualified leads, we talk about marketing qualified accounts more and more, where we, instead of surfacing when someone says, hi, I want to talk to you, we have been surfacing dependent on signals around an account. So our sales force usually matches these people by with different kinds of intent. Some of them came into our events, but maybe it wasn't one of our top events, or maybe it wasn't the kind of, they didn't actually speak to a salesperson. Maybe just they came to a counter for just a pair of socks or something. So there's that kind of intent. They could have downloaded a white paper. That's a signal of intent. So at some point, their intent score is high enough for us to go and talk to them. And that's how we don't really consider them as a part of our MMM, but aside from MMM, that's one way we measure and route these accounts to be able to say that instead of just relying on form fills, how do I take all of these other intents, give them a score, and take them into our sales funnel based on these signals.
Okay, so then what signals do you pipe back into Google and Facebook and TikTok then in terms of the optimization strategy? So like their algorithms can only play with their signals, and they're targeting users through audiences and conversions.
What you could do is, depending on these signals, you could start tiering your accounts. Which ones are you getting a high signal from? And these could be sort of mid-market accounts in the hospitality industry. So you could try to find those patterns in the accounts that are surfacing more and more. So you could have A-tier accounts, B-tier accounts, C-tier accounts, and then try to understand patterns in your tier A accounts, which you could then feed back to Google and Facebook. Try to identify patterns of who is actually engaging with you.
The thing I'm hearing, and is what I wanted to say, it sounds like for something like MMM, there comes a point where MMM becomes reasonable, right? So if you're a certain type of brand, which has a product which has a certain purchase consideration cycle, and your strategy has changed from pure acquisition to awareness, then you would potentially start thinking about MMM. But if you're a brand of a certain size and your purchase cycle is still really short, you should still be potentially thinking MTA.
I would agree with that. If your purchase cycle is largely digital and very short, then MTA should do the job for you.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. And actually, that's another
Yes.
factor. Is it a
Yeah.
digital purchase, or is it going to be a more of
Right.
a golden handshake type purchase between, like two different parties? But I was thinking about this in the sense that MMM, MTA, all of these things, it really comes down to the type of person who leads your marketing, right? And let's say, and I'll give you an example. Like, let's say Coke. Coke is not a particularly long purchase cycle, but they would never do an MTA campaign.
Hmm.
Right, they would purely rely on econometrics. But from what you've just said, Coke is about building brand awareness, which is a long-term measure, which you can't measure with MMM, right? So at some point, even MMM is not the right thing for you, and neither is MTA, because and I think back to when. Obviously, I was never in the room at the time because I wasn't even born. But when Steve Jobs hired John Scully, and John Scully was someone who'd built Pepsi. But John Scully came in with a preconceived mindset of how he should do business, not how it should be done at Apple, right? And I feel like all of this stuff, MMM, MTAs, all of these type of things, becomes conversations that happen in the trenches, but actually the decision to do an MTA or an MMM is going to happen from the person who has already got the budget. And I know I said this earlier, but I really struggled. Like, I'm happy to sit there and argue if MMM is the right thing. Like, Huel is a great example, right? Huel is a brand that started off pure D2C, which meant that MTA was the thing we should be doing. But now we're an omni-channel organization, and you can buy us in retail, in supermarkets, in news agents. You can buy us on Amazon or on TikTok, right? So the power of MTA has been diluted a little bit. But you're
Huel is
trying
at
to we're at the cusp, right? Like
Yeah, you are at the perfect point where your brand matters. Because when someone who doesn't know Huel walks into Marks and Spencer, they know about Huel, but I see those packs of Huel. Like it should make me want to buy it because I've heard of it. I've seen your ads in different places, not just ad that's popped up on Facebook. Maybe an influencer has spoken about it. Those things actually matter now. Whereas
now
you are right.
now we're talking about brand though. So if you can't measure the value of the brand because it's a
No.
long-term build.
I think that's we're talking about two different things. One is you invest in. There are two kinds of campaigns that you're running on TV. One is the more brandy, and you are doing that for the long term, but you also want to drive sales. So I don't think MMM can capture the full benefit of your TV campaign. It should still show up in sales, but not. Maybe the ROI should actually be 80%, but I'm only saying that it's 50%. Right?
I see. Okay.
I would still see an impact. And at the end of the day, for something like Coke, going back to your Coke example, the value of any brand actually shows up in the base. Your base is so large and it continues to be that high because you have spent many, many years building that commodity. And then you would definitely see a dent in your base if something was to hurt your brand.
We are quickly approaching having to wrap up, but I want to ask you, so where do you go to get your information about this? Where do you go to find inspiration and motivation to keep learning about this marketing analytics stuff, to experiment with this, to kind of push those boundaries and within your career, within the industry? Like, I just want to ask, like, how do you stay on top of this? How do you know what the hell is going on in the world and what you should be doing next?
By the way, just to interrupt, I love that I'm driving all of this, like the technical questions, and Dan always does the human part. He's so much better at the human part about, hey, let's talk about Rupali as a person instead of Rupali as the marketing analyst who does MMM.
Well, I just realized that we've spoken MMM this entire time, and I just wanted to kind of rip it away from MMM for a bit and talk about the broader kind of like a career in marketing and marketing data,
No, I think that's a good question. This will be a controversial opinion, but I think I do get a lot of my knowledge from LinkedIn as well. There are some great people in MMM on LinkedIn that I follow. And just having them in my network means that I have valuable things to read on LinkedIn as well. So that's been fantastic. And then I work with some fantastic people in analytics, in marketing, everything that has helped. And going to events like Crap Talks, which always help me up level. But seriously, I think the best way to stay on top of things is talking to new people and meeting new people. And that's always a way to make sure, learn about what else is happening out there aside from only your role, and a great way to develop and grow.
I think what's really interesting about this conversation so far that I've observed, we've gone into the nitty gritties of should you, shouldn't you of MMM, but actually we haven't even discussed the details. Like, so probably you led with, like the context that needs to go into an MMM, the data scientists, the academic approach, and then the business approach. Like, what does that look like? And obviously we're not going to cover in this episode. So actually, what I wanted to maybe just finish on the MMM part was really around things we didn't talk about today regarding MMM, which was how do you first of all bring it in house? What are the factors that go into it? How do you give the data scientists the context of bringing MMM in-house? But also, I like the fact that as an industry, we've done full circle, right? Like MMM is not new as a way of measuring things.
90s, 80s.
Exactly, right? And it's come full circle because of things like cookie loss and our inability to track people properly, but also the move towards a clickless social media world where people don't consume media where you have to click something, you passively observe it. So much wasn't covered in MMM, and actually it's a topic that's got so much depth to it, and I feel like we barely scratched the surface of it. So Rupali, we might have to bring you back again for a part two.
I'd love to, and one thing I think also would be amazing to talk about in more detail one day is how to build that relationship with finance, because one thing that I've noticed in all my MMM roles is that relationship with finance has been key to adoption. Finance loves to know the ROI, and it loves to know that one ROI number that marketing is delivering on. And if you can have that trust with finance, that's half the battle internally won.
I'm sure Dan has some finishing questions for this as well, but I know, Rupali, you and I we talk almost, there was a point we were talking fortnightly, and I think we're down to like monthly ever since you've had the birth of your second child. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
So I guess my kind of like curveball and channeling my inner Dan and more human, what is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's maybe looking to break into marketing analytics or maybe already works in marketing analytics? What is the career advice you'd give them?
Marketing analytics is such a I think a fantastic part of analytics, just because there are so many problems to solve, so many challenges and different kinds of challenges. And you solve it by experimentation, you solve it by building data science models, you solve it by doing it covers all kinds of different ways of measurement, and it'll keep you on your toes, and it's something always developing. So I do think you won't get bored of just doing marketing analytics, and it's a great way to build a lot of business skills as well. If someone is coming in now, just good luck and enjoy.
I've got a last question for you. As someone who works in marketing analytics and is currently on a podcast called Analytics Unscripted, please can you help me and define the word analytics? What does it mean?
Analytics is answering why. So I think what we do as analysts day in and day out is help the business understand why. And that's the reason I don't think our analytics jobs are redundant in any way with the dawn of AI, because currently AI is amazing at telling us what has changed. But that why will always remain human exercise. And it currently is. I think one day AI will be able to learn a lot of the context, giving us more of our time to solve even more interesting problems. That's how I would define analytics.
Nice. I like that answer. Thank you.
I love for all of the qualitative researchers who in the past have said to me, analytics helps you understand the what, and then research helps you understand the why. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it.
On that note, that's it. Thank you so much, Rupali.
Right. Good to see you both, and happy weekend.
Thanks, Rupali. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
All right.